Okay, let me just start by saying with this video of a Cinemagraph, I just did the complete tutorial video and then realised the audio hadn't recorded, so I'm now recording the audio separately. So if it is slightly disjointed from what you're seeing on the video, I apologise, but I am trying to do it as succinctly as possible. To make Cinemagraph, you're going to need obviously a video to start with. I've decided to use one of my kittens. Now, some people take a short amount of video, a couple of seconds. I like to take a couple of minutes and then pick which part of that video I'd like. Obviously, you can have a bit more of an artistic license then because there's going to be more video to choose from. So, I've got this little video of my kitten and I want to search through it and find a part which has got a little bit of movement, something that you can use. And I personally like the opening and closing of the eyes that we've got towards the end of the video. So if we just find approximately where in the video that happens, so it's around there. Now you're not going to want to crop it exactly, you're going to want to have an approximate little bit of video from the section that you're going to want to make that Cinemagraph out of. So I reckon my eyes are fully open around there and fully closed about here. So you take a little bit more, about anything between kind of 3 and 5 seconds worth of video is good. The less you can have is obviously better because it's going to keep your file sizes down, and when we're creating things for the internet, that's important. So what we're going to do is just export that little bit of video so that it's optimized. Now we want to keep the quality when exporting as high as possible. So if you can do 1080p, do 1080p. If you can only do 720 like my video, when my video camera records up to, then do 720. The reason is when we start operating with the file, we're going to want to have the image quality as good as possible. So choose where you want to export your movie. Firstly, I'm just going to throw it on the desktop, and then when we finally come around to export it, we'll just prepare the project. I'm just going to speed the video through this bit. And done. Then we're done with iMovie or whatever. Say you're on a PC, you're probably going to need a different program to do that. So we just go out to our desktop. But yeah, if you're using a PC, use whatever video editing program you have in order to get that little bit of footage. Next, we're going to open up Photoshop. And a lot of places you'll use this video frames to layers. I don't do that. I initially start by just opening that video. I just open it normally in Photoshop. Gotta love that background, right? Right, okay, so here it is. It just looks like an image. So what we want to do is bring up the window and make sure we have the animation window open. So here we can see as we drag the slider along, we flip between our various frames. Now what we want to do here is find the first and the last frame for where we want our animation to occur. So we'll start by trying to find this point where I think the eyes are at their most open before the animation starts. About there. Now sometimes with Photoshop what you'll find is if you export the movie as we're going to and then re-import it, then sometimes the first frame is a little darker, which will cause flickering in your Cinemagraph. So what you want to do is find the start point where you want and then move one frame earlier and then select that as the start point of your video. So that having that one frame earlier means that if that frame is darker, we can delete it and it's not going to be an issue. Then what we're going to need to do is find the end point of where that video is going to occur. So the video is a little bit out of me. So finding the end point, so the eyes are closing and I reckon they close around there. So again, find where I believe it closes, and then which is there, and then add a frame. Just in case we get, it just helps keep that keep the consistency with the video. So then we're going to export and we're going to render video. Keep the settings exactly as they are, and just click render. It'll ask you if you want to replace your existing one, that's fine, so just whack enter, replace that video. Now you can safely close down the video that you've already got open. Don't know why the video is taking so long here. Yeah, so That should all be replaced successfully. Waiting for myself. I think I went to blow my nose when I did the video, didn't think about that. Trundling along, should have edited this out. Hindsight, eh? Wait a second. So like I said, yeah, we've added one frame to the start and one frame to the end of where we think our animation should be. Just allows us that if there is, say, a colour difference, we can then delete those frames. Here we go. Okay, so exit that one, don't save it. This time again, do exactly the same. Open that same movie, which is the one we just exported, and we should see the frames. All the frames that are included are those animation frames. This time it seems as if the darkening of the first frame that I said sometimes happens hasn't happened, but it's better to have it there and not need it. So what we're going to do is go into the animation layer options, and we're going to start by flattening the frames into layers. What this will do is take that timeline and flatten each individual frame into a layer, as we will then see appear in the layers. So there we are, the frames are flattened down into lots of layers. Now the good thing here is then we can start operating with them individually. Now what we're going to want to start by doing is unchecking the various frames. Actually no, what we're going to start by doing is getting rid of the last frame and the first frame, because like I said, we don't need those ones. So the very top frame and the very bottom frame we've managed to get rid of. So now we can make sure the video is really lovely and smooth. Then we're going to go back into the animation palette and convert to a frame animation. By doing that, the timeline animation from the bottom will disappear, and we're going to convert it to a frame animation. This is exactly what we want. Okay, so we've got the timer at the bottom of frame 1. What we're going to do is click the little drop down and we take that to no delay. So our frames will then move from one to the other without any delay between them. So as we see, we'll then want to uncheck all the various layers. I've just sped it up there. There we go. Until we've just got our base layer. Now this is the layer that creates the entire animation. As you can see, if we flick between the first and last layer, there is various parts of movement. You can see some on the back, around the ears, the eyes, there's breathing in there. We're not going to want to use all of that, we're just going to want to use a little bit. Now I'm going to try and focus on the eyes. So they're going to be my movement part. Now initially I was going to do just the eyes, but as you can see the ears move with it, and which will make it look a bit more natural. So I'm going to select that kind of head area for the focus of my Cinemagraph animation. So here comes what's known as the quite tedious bit. Now there is something to note when doing this next bit. Frame 1 is going to be frame 1, that's fine. That's going to be the basis of what our picture is going to be. So if you're going to create one with lots of people or anything in, make sure that's the picture that you're going to want. Then we're going to create a new layer like that, as I just did, and select the second frame. Now, like I said, we don't want the entire frame to be animated. We only want that small section. So we're going to create a layer mask on the second frame. There's the layer mask. And then I'm just going to start by selecting the area that I'm going to want animated. Now in an animation such as this, where there's not a lot of movement, the good thing is we can reuse that one layer mask on every single layer, which does make the creation of a Cinemagraph significantly easier. Sometimes it can take half an hour to do one, sometimes 3 hours, kind of depending on what complexity is happening. So I'm going to start off just by making that layer mask on that layer. I'm not quite sure what I was talking about here. So we're just going to fill it with the background colour. It should have filled with the background colour, as I dare notice. But that, as you can see, I've created the mask the wrong way round. So quick inversion on that. And you're going to want the little white bit. The white bit is the bit on the mask that we are animating. So that's that mask set up correctly. So you've got layer 1 plus the current frame layer that you're working on with the mask bit which is changing. Now if we're going to do an animation, like I say, where just the same area is moving, that's great. But let's say you had somebody who was walking across the screen. You would have to, with the creation of each layer mask, include the places that that person has been on each frame. So let's say they're walking across, it has to continually expand, else when you had a person in one part of the screen, they may also appear in the background of a previous mask on another part of the screen. I don't know if that makes sense, but as you play around with it, you'll understand what I mean. So if you have a person there and at another place, they're going to reappear. So you have to cover the entire movement area of the object that is moving. Anyway, so what we need to do now is, with all the other frames, is mask them off accordingly. So create another frame, deselect the frame that we're on, the layer that we're on, select that layer mask, and then create a new layer mask. So as you can see, the layer mask is exactly the same. Then do the same with the next layer, and so on. We're just duplicating that layer mask on every single frame as we go. Now this takes a while of time. Took me about 7 minutes, but what I've done is just sped up the video here somewhat. This isn't me in Godzilla Speedy Gonzales mode. Just sped it up because there are 47 frames. It does take a fair bit of time. Now this is the bit that takes the longest by a long shot in doing a Cinemagraph. Like I say, this one actually took me 7 minutes 33 seconds to do the entire, all the masks. If you were doing one where somebody was walking across the screen and it was you have to do each mask individually, then that can take a fair bit of time. Say you're doing hair movement as well. As you can expect, the position of the hair changes in each one, so you have to account for all the possible positions that that hair can be in. So doing the layer masks then does take a bit more time. But anyway, here we are with all the layer masks done. As if you see, if you flick the start and the last one off, you can see that you get just the bits moving that we want moving. Now we want to change the loop down the bottom left there to forever, so that our Cinemagraph will keep on looping. And if we play it now, you'll see the animation happens, but it won't be quite right, because the last frame and the first frame aren't the same. So you get that jump, as you can see there. Jump. Jump. Which isn't what we want. So what we need to do is figure out a way of making the first frame and the last frame the same. How we do that is select... Oh, what I noticed though is that the first bunch of frames, not a lot was really happening. There was no really visible movement. So what I'm trying to do is just try and find the first point where I realise movement is really happening in the eye, which is around... You can see there's definite movement there. So go a little bit before, little tiny bit there. So that's really where the animation started. So in hindsight, could have trimmed a few more layers off there. So I think 24 is actually the start. So I'm going to select 23 through 21 and delete those frames. That gets rid of the frames. Now we've got rid of the frames, we don't need the corresponding layers. So layers from the bottom through to 23 I've also able to get rid of. So that's going to make our animation a bit smaller, which is going to be good because it will obviously help reduce our file size. Now we've still got the issue where the jumping will appear from the last frame to the first. So we'll select the middle selection of frames. So ignore the first and last frame. Select the middle selection of frames, so in this case 2 through 23, and copy them. Then select the final frame, and we're going to paste those frames after that frame. So leave it as its default selection, paste after selection, click OK. Now don't deselect the frames here. This is the new pasting of frames. So what we're then going to want to do is reverse them. So we have the direction of one way of closing the eyes and the opposite direction of opening the eyes. So which means the end two frames are the same, or run into the same frame. So as I play it, it's much better with the eyes opening and closing. But there is, as you can see, there's a flick there, so it means I've got a wayward frame somewhere in the middle. So I'll just find out where that is and just get rid of it. Pretty easy to do. Mistakes like this happen sometimes when you're creating cinemagraphs. Just go through the frames one at a time in order to find the one that is the problem. There it is. So we can literally just delete that one frame. Yeah, because the ones either side of it are both correct. So I'm not going to want to dispose of it, let's just delete it. Delete frame, done. So now when we try testing the animation, it should be nice and smooth opening and closing. Well, as smooth as Photoshop. Photoshop won't do it as ideally as it will end up in a browser at the end. But there, logistically speaking, is the start of what's happening. Now, I don't want the eyes just to be blinking open and closing because that doesn't look particularly good. I want to have the eyes open for an amount of time. So I'm going to set a delay of 3 seconds for that frame. And also, when the eyes are closed in the middle, about frame 23, 24, I'm going to want to keep them closed for a little bit. So it's like she opens her eyes, keeps them open, closes her eyes, keeps them closed. So again, set that 3 second delay. So now, when I play it from the start, it will wait 1, 2, 3, play, pause, 2, 3, play, and open. Actually, I don't like it like that. I don't think it looks particularly real. I guess I don't like the eyes staying open. So what I'm going to do is get rid of the delay on the open section and increase the closed one to 5 seconds. So I think it'll just make it look a little bit more realistic. Now, the thing is about animated GIFs, and what you'll see is about cinemagraphs, is they've all got this kind of artistic style, primarily done because of the limitation of the colours that you have with cinemagraphs and animated GIFs. So we're going to start by playing a layer mask over the entire thing. Now, to do this, I like to create a new layer at the top of all the layers. Now that layer, as you'll see, if we click on the different frames, applies to every single layer. So you can do it once and then it's going to apply to the entire movie. So I personally like to bring out a bit of the saturation. So bring up the hue and saturation. This bit's really an element of taste and what you really want to achieve with the picture. You can change the hue, you can do it black and white, you can change the brightness, you know, the lightness here. It's completely up to yourself about your own personal taste. Personally, I like to sometimes make it a bit darker. Sometimes I'll colorize it. You know, if you want to give something an old feel and a sepia tone, you can do that there. For this one, I don't think that kind of stuff really works though. So I'm just going to stick with my usual, which is a slight reduction of the saturation. And then maybe make it a tiny bit lighter than it was there. And you can't just apply just the one, you can then apply another mask if you want to. I like to sometimes play with the levels as well. You know, you can make the darkers dark and you can make the lights lighter. Again, it's all a matter of taste. You can have some really kind of high contrast ones which look quite good, but sometimes they look a bit cheesy. I find the lower saturated ones tend to work a little bit nicer. But again, all just a matter of taste. So for this one, I'm going to not really vary the settings that much. Maybe a slight level change there, and I'm happy with that. Now it's as good as ready to go. So what we're going to have to do is think about what's going to happen when we export it out onto the internet. Now, one of the big things about these is file size. Now, for me, I never create a cinemagraph which is wider than 750 pixels. So if we go to image size we can change the width from our current one down to 750. Now it's good to do it at this stage, the very end stage, because that means that you've worked with the high quality as much as you can, and then you're just changing it for its optimization at the end, because we can either think about number of frames or we can think about the size or the quality when it comes to our web compression. And my blog has 750 maximum width, so that's why I go down to 750. So there, we're ready to go. So we're going to save that for web and devices, obviously. And we're not going to want, most people have their default as JPEG or PNG. We're going to want to change that to a GIF, obviously. So just give that a second to catch up. Okay, so here's our animated GIF. Now I try to keep the file size generally between 200 and 600k, depending on the complexity of the animation, the level of detail that I want to go into. At the moment this one's running at 884.2, so it's a little on the high side. Sorry, I'm a bit ill. So we're going to play with the lossy amount, just by small numbers, just trying to bring it down just below 600k. So 16, not quite. You can be really precise with this and you can play around with it and check how it affects the image quality, but for me that looks fine. If we give it a trial play, it'll play approximately as it's going to. It'll probably be a bit slower, but that's about right. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So once we're done, we save it. Again, laptop's not being particularly quick with me here. Save it as a GIF. Getting Cinemagraph is absolutely fine. Save it, give it a second, and hey presto, we are then done. And that will be the completed Cinemagraph saved onto your desktop when it catches up. Oh, how tiresome. Okay, there we go. So now minimizing it down, we're going to want to open up your web browser of choice, just using Safari on here. And I know, because I'm talking over a recording I did an hour ago, that Safari decided it didn't want to work. And this is obviously looking for jobs. So I'm just going to force quit Safari and then try it again. Sorry about this. You gotta love that desktop, right? Super Trooper. Anyway, so as you can see, we've got the Cinemagraph there on the desktop, ready to go. So we get your web browser of choice. All web browsers will support them because they are a very old format. They are the animated GIFs, but these work nicely. So start by just opening a new frame or whatever, and then drag your Cinemagraph into your browser, and it will show you very nicely what it will look like as and when it is up on the internet. Eyes closed for 3 seconds. No, 5 seconds. No, I changed it. Eyes open and eyes closed. There we go. Very, very subtle, but that's kind of what the idea of a Cinemagraph is about. It's about that subtlety. Got to bear in mind the first run through of your Cinemagraph will sometimes be a little bit jerky, but otherwise, yeah, that should be okay. And there you go. That's a completed Cinemagraph step-by-step tutorial. If you've got any questions about that, you can always email me at andy.valentine.photography@gmail.com, or if you go to my blog, andyvalentine.wordpress.com, you can always comment on there and I'll help you out all that I can.